Hey, what's up, classes? Mr. Hayes here on an asynchronous Wednesday, talking conclusion to wrap up your movie review. 6 possible strategies right here on the module. I'd like to go through each of these very briefly, talk about which one I chose and why, and walk you through my Dead Poets example. So, number one, tie it back to the introduction by connecting those two ideas. This makes your review seem cohesive. A good start and a good finish that tie together can be really effective. So if you talked about the skepticism or you were unsure about the movie choices that I've made in class, and so you went into Sherlock Holmes thinking, this might not be very good, maybe you bring back that same idea in the conclusion. And if it's a positive review, you say how much you were pleasantly surprised. Hey, Mr. Hayes actually got one right. Number two, challenge the reader with a thought provoking rhetorical question that he or she has to stop and think about. What is something related to the movie that would make that person reading your review put the review down and start to ponder a little bit about maybe a movie fact or something about Sherlock's legacy as a really famous investigator and crime solver, or a theme related to the film about following your passion versus your love, kind of like Watson with Sherlock versus Mary, that maybe applies to the reader's life. That kind of connects to number three, tying the message and theme of the movie to what's happening in our own world or present day. Like in Black Panther, with sharing the world's wealth with underprivileged people. What can we learn from that? The Black Panther review, at least one of them that I've read, ends with that idea of how kind of subtly the director was sending a message to all of our politicians and world leaders to be more generous about the richest countries in the world sharing their wealth with some of the poorer countries and helping out with humanitarian efforts, etc. That also ties into Black Panther. So there's something related to Sherlock Holmes that you might be able to do with that. Three would be probably a difficult one for Sherlock, though. I'm not going to lie. Four, you want to end with a powerful fact or detail about the movie. So, for example, this movie made $450 million in the theaters. Who knew that much money could be wasted? Or on the flip side, if Sherlock did make a lot of money, you can look up the budget and say something similar to every single penny was well spent. From the acting, by I'm sure Robert Downey has a pretty big price tag, the costumes to the scenery, it was all well spent. So you may do a little research on Sherlock Holmes, find out some fun facts. IMDb might be a good place for that. Some other articles about the movie, and include that in your conclusion. Five, recommend a next step of action. Here's what the reviewer must do next. Maybe it's watch the sequel to Sherlock Holmes. Maybe it's read a Sherlock Holmes novel or watch the BBC show. Maybe it's something that's related to storyline of the movie that can also apply to your reader's life. But recommend a next step of action. For example, after Dead Poet Society, make sure you thank your favorite teacher. Six, leave a quote from the film that echoes your overall message. This is a good conclusion idea for a 5 paragraph CQA back when we read our memoirs in October. What quote from Michael Orr said really captures the essence or the overall message of your CQA? Same thing here. Is there a quote from the film? Is there a quote from Sherlock? Something about maybe the game is afoot and how exciting it is that Sherlock is always chasing the next adventure that you think might connect well to your review and really capture how much you loved it or capture how much you hated it. So I chose number one, tie back to the intro by connecting the two ideas for my Dead Poets review. So what do I need to do? Well, I got to reread my intro, of course, my first paragraph, that hook and claim, so I know what I talked about, and figure out how I can connect back from the beginning to the end and tie it all together cohesively. Well, I remember back in my hook, I talked about how some movies change your life. And so I want that same idea in my conclusion. I'm not going to read this over again because I've done it with you already. But I bolded this sentence here. That is Dead Poet Society. For me, a movie so profound and enlightening and helped me figure out, as Mr. Keating so eloquently put it, what to live for. So I've got not only the idea that this movie stayed with me forever, but it also showed me that there are things worth living for, like art and poetry and romance, that are so vital to the human spirit. So I can go in two different directions there. Talk about how it stuck with me for days and days and days after, or this theme of what to live for. I'm going to select one of those, or maybe a little bit of both, and make sure I capture those same ideas in my conclusion. So here's what I came to. And I came up with this: Dead Poet Society is not for the faint of heart. You get so attached to the characters, the ending feels like someone has ripped it out and stomped on it. But it is slowly regained in the days that follow, as Mr. Keating's profound messages stay with you long after the credits roll. Just in that last sentence, I was able to integrate both of those two ideas: Mr. Keating's messages of what to live for, but also how it sticks with you many, many days, months, and even years after you see it. So you can see how I tied those two things together here, those same themes from beginning to end. Now I have a cohesive whole, almost like an ending where my reviewer will put the review down satisfied because there seemed to be a real plan and a real organizational aspect to this where I thought this through, making sure I really honed in on that important message or theme. So I went with number one. That may be something that you start with, see if you can craft that. If not, you may pivot to a different idea here. Four will probably take some research. Six would probably take a perusing of the script. But whatever you pick, you can make it work. These are all worthwhile and strategies that have worked in years past for my students. Any questions, any concerns? Send me a Google chat today. I'd be happy to help. Thanks, everybody.